Hello everyone, welcome to Security Compliance's CMMC Level 1 workshop, powered by InterSec Inc. My name is Harjot Singh, and I'm a Business Development Manager here at InterSec, and I will be your host today. We're going to be going over information on CMMC Level 1, as well as how to move forwards towards achieving the CMMC Level 1 certification. On today's agenda, we're going to be going over our company introduction. We're going to then move swiftly into a deep dive into CMMC Level 1. We're going to discuss some CMMC compliance challenges you might face, and we're going to end with a hands-on workshop so you can feel CMMC for yourself as well as get to interact with our product. Starting with the company introduction. So a little bit about us. This is InterSec Inc. We were incorporated in 2013 in Ashburn, VA. We're a boutique cybersecurity service provider for commercial, state, and federal clients. We hold some quality certifications in the cybersecurity arena, as we have years of experience in this field. That includes the CMMI Service 3, ISO 27001, and ISO 9001. We are also a CMMC-AB registered provider organization, and we are soon to also be an official C3PAO from CMMC-AB. Our CMMC services include assessment, advisory, consulting, and managed security services. Let us move forward. We're going to go ahead and get into the CMMC Level 1 deep dive now. Just as a little reminder, hopefully you can leave all questions and concerns till the end of the workshop and the hands-on demo. Hopefully all your questions will be answered along the way, but if you have any pending questions, just please hold off until the end, and we will make sure to address them at that time. So let's get into the CMMC Level 1 deep dive. So before we discuss CMMC Level 1 and CMMC in its a bit more depth, we need to understand what CMMC is and what it stands for. Well, CMMC stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. This was established in January 31st, 2020. The first version of it was released at that time, and the current version we're on is the 1.02 version. Now, there has been existing regulations in the past from the DoD and the government in general in terms of what is required for you to be able to get contracts. But the difference between CMMC and these existing regulations, such as the DFARS clause that many of you might be familiar with, is that we're going to be building upon trust. In the past, it was all about trust. That's all you really had when it came to certifications or managing security requirements. But for CMMC, we're going to add a verification component with respect to those cybersecurity requirements. So it's going to be a little extra step in the process to ensure that not only is that trust being held, but we're also verifying that that's actually being completed and that you're actually meeting those cybersecurity requirements to safeguard your information appropriately. Moving forward, now that we've kind of understood what the definition of CMMC is, there are going to be 5 levels in the CMMC spectrum, with level 1 being the first one and level 5 being the last one. Level 1 is going to be all about basic safeguarding of federal contract information. And for those of you who do not know what federal contract information is, the official definition from acquisition.gov is on the screen at this time if you would like to read it. But if we were to define FCI in a bit more simple sense, it's any information you receive from the government, whether it's an request for proposal or a document we received from the government. It's going to be considered FCI. Level 2 onwards is all about controlled unclassified information. Level 2 is going to be a bit of a really important level here because that's where you kind of transition from level 1 into the more nitty-gritty type of stuff. So you get into the more advanced things when you move towards level 3, level 4, and level 5. And that's where you start focusing on CUI. Now, in regards to CMMC Level 1, there's going to be specific domains that are particular to CMMC Level 1. And what domains are there just going to be key sets of capabilities. And the key sets of capabilities or the domains in CMMC Level 1 are at the screen at this time are access control, identification and authentication, media protection, physical protection, system and communications protection, and system and information integrity. And each of these come with their own respective practices and capabilities within them. Now, moving forward into discussing each of these domains, we're going to go ahead and do a few things. We're going to look at each domain and what it really consists within each of those domains, and think of it in your own sense of how it might apply to you and your company. So let us go ahead and start by discussing access control. So for access control, you're going to be looking things at like limiting information system access to authorized users, processes acting on behalf of authorized users, or devices. The way you can start doing something like this is ensuring that you have an IT administrator. The IT administrator doesn't have to be a specific position that exists solely within your organization. It could even be your CEO. That's the IT administrator. They're still handling that job. You have a dedicated person that's managing who is accessing your systems, and that can include requesting access and approving those people, having an onboarding or offboarding process so you can ensure that when they don't need access to the information any longer, you have appropriate measures set in place so that they can't access that information. That can also include establishing role and group-based access, which just means that if they don't need access to the information, they shouldn't have access for it. Another aspect that is in access control is controlling information posted or processed on publicly accessible information systems. While your own systems that have this sensitive information is important, you also have to make sure you're also looking at what you're posting publicly, whether that be on social media, or you're making a blog post, or it could even be on your company website or product. You have to ensure that it's not FCI or it's not CUI, and that if you are posting something, that it's being regulated, and you make sure you double check before it gets posted anywhere publicly. Moving forward into identification and authentication. Here, it's going to be all about identifying information system users, processes acting on behalf of users, or devices. And the ways you could be doing such things is background checks. You are probably all familiar with background checks, and doing those within your own organization repeatedly is also a very good habit to get used to. And just ensuring that whoever is using the information systems in your organization, they should have proper access to be doing so. This can include NDAs. They can include establishing internal users versus external users, which again is extremely important. Whoever shouldn't have access should not have access. And connecting back to access control, it can also involve having an onboarding or offboarding process. Another thing that exists within this domain is authenticating the identities of those users, processes, or devices as a prerequisite. And I'm going to re-emphasize that, a prerequisite to allowing access to organizational information systems. So before even letting them access these systems that might potentially have a CUI or FCI, you want to ensure that they have the proper credentials to be able to access this information. So that's all identification and authentication is about. Moving swiftly forward, we're going to be into media protection now. And media protection is all about sanitizing or destroying information system media that contains FCI being disposed or released for reuse. Now, this one is also particularly important. So for your company, this could be removing information from the media that it can't be retrieved, whether that be deleting the post or removing it entirely. This can also involve logical destruction, which means incorporating stuff like data masking, redacting, or cryptographic delete, just ensuring that that data is no longer recoverable in any shape or form. Just putting it in the recycle bin is not going to be enough, especially if it's FCI. And it can even be physical destruction. So if you have like any documents that you received from the government that are tangible, so they're not uploaded on the cloud or anything like that, you want to ensure that those have been shredded or even pulverized. You just want to make sure that whatever you have that is in relation to FCI, once you have no use for it, you have to get rid of it and ensure that you continue to get rid of it as you move forward into later times. For physical protection, it's like media protection, except now it's going to be on the physical side of things. So it's going to involve things like limiting physical access to organizational information systems, equipment, and the respective operating environments to authorized individuals. So that means that implementing things like locks or card readers and badges into your company building, establishing visitor logs to ensure that you know who came in and who went out and what they were doing when they came there. If they're not an official member of your organization, it doesn't even hurt to escort them, because if they don't need access to something, you want to make sure that they're only going where they need to be. Another thing that is related to the offboarding and onboarding process that we discussed in previous domains is activating and deactivating said card readers. If that's how you choose to move forward with ensuring that your building is secure and that any systems or information systems are secure, make sure that you deactivate card readers when they're no longer usable. So that way anyone with an old card reader can just get back in. This can also involve maintaining audit logs of physical access. So again, just making sure who accessed what, especially equipment, because if it's equipment that has, again, information that requires to be safeguarded, you want every potential log of it, of who was accessing it, of who was tampering with the data if it was required to be worked with. For systems and information integrity, this is all about identifying, reporting, and correcting information and information system flaws in a timely manner. This also involves providing protection from malicious code at appropriate locations within organizational information systems. So this one, you have to think about a few things. Let me pose you sort of a question. What would you do if your system was not up to date and perhaps had a leak in it that could allow a malicious entity to access your information that should not be accessed? Would you do anything about it? Just think about that. It's required that you do your very best in ensuring that stuff like this is kept up to date, especially when it comes to security relevant updates. That could be implementing patches, implementing service packs, or even antivirus signatures. You just want to keep making sure that your data is being protected. You want to configure even automatic security updates so that you don't have to worry about it, ensuring that, again, your information is being protected in every way possible. Perform periodic scans. Again, it doesn't hurt. Even if there's no update available, just go ahead and scan your system to make sure it's not vulnerable in any shape or form, because all of access control is about maintaining access and ensuring that only the proper entities can have access to FCI and CUI. Finally, we're going to be into systems and communications protection. This is going to be about monitoring, controlling, and protecting organizational communications at the external boundaries and key internal boundaries of the information system. This also means implementing subnetworks for publicly accessible system components, that are physically and logically separated from internal networks. Now, this sounds a bit wordy and it does sound a bit confusing, but again, let me pose you another question. How do you ensure that an employee does not have access to websites you deem unsafe? That's something that you would consider when coming into this domain. Well, you can implement a web proxy. That way that whoever doesn't have access or isn't supposed to be having access, they can't access those malicious websites that could potentially pose a threat to your systems. Another question to think about: how do you prevent an employee from accessing company assets from, let's say, a Starbucks? This is where implementing, again, a VPN would be important, ensuring that you have these steps in place that no matter what is being done, your information is protected. So again, to summarize, access control is not only about protecting the information within your organization, it's making sure externally, it's making sure in every single aspect that data is protected. Now we're going to move forward into discussing a few CMMC compliance challenges that you might face. So let us stop for a moment and think about something. What are some typical challenges that a small or medium-sized business might face? CMMC compliance is obviously not an easy journey, and many of you here will realize that. And there can be various challenges that small and medium-sized businesses might have towards achieving such a goal. Most employees are full-time client billable, so they're not working for free, and most of the time they're not all security savvy, which can make it difficult for the CMMC process because there's a lot of IT-related information, and there's a lot of technical challenges posed by CMMC and its compliance that can sometimes be a challenge for your company or for your process. Another thing that becomes an issue is limited financial resources. People that are offering CMMC compliance services are not always cheap, whether that be finding someone on the marketplace, an individual that's an auditor, or just finding like a new IT person to help you get back on track. It's not going to be cheap. And to add to that problem, with the pandemic, a lot of businesses have been financially compromised. There's a lot of people going through tough times at this moment, not getting the contracts that they need, and working day by day. So with this new requirement for the CMMC, having CMMC and having that certification, it's going to be a very, very difficult process. On top of that, who has time to interpret all this information? If you've looked into CMMC prior to coming to this workshop, you will realize there's tons and tons of information available on the web, especially from the CMMC accreditation body, whether that be the guides, appendices on that information, information on CMMC itself, or specifics on each of the domains and the practices that you have to follow. A lot of these guides are very lengthy, and they have a lot of information. And to top on all of that, the information is always a bit confusing. It's cryptic. It doesn't make sense. Let's go over an example to prove that point. Here on the screen at this time is going to be one of the practices from the access control domain we discussed earlier. I'm going to go ahead and read it out loud to you, and you can read it yourselves as well to see if you understand it. This is going to be limit information system access to authorized users, processes acting on behalf of authorized users, or devices, including other information systems. Now, if you take a second, maybe some of it made sense, maybe some of it didn't. And of course, that's expected, that's okay. Because as I said before, these CMMC practice descriptions can end up being quite cryptic. For a non-security professional, this CMMC practice description is not going to be easy to understand, especially for a small or medium-sized businesses with the problems that we outlined before. And to understand this is one thing, but then implementing is another thing. Are you implementing it to the proper degree? When the auditor comes, have you implemented it to the expectation that they would have required from you? Because again, you're spending time, you're spending resources. So if you don't do it right the first time, then that's more time and more resources the second time. On top of that, since this is a new sort of system that's building on existing requirements, you need to spend time cross-referencing stuff like NIST 800-171 towards the CMMC model appendices and continuing to map references to other existing standards to try and make sense. The point is, it's a very lengthy and hard process. And for many of you, a spreadsheet might be the solution. And of course, that's something that many might typically just refer to because spreadsheets are easy. They look and are used by many organizations for a variety of different reasons. But there's many problems with having spreadsheets, especially for CMMC compliance. Not to mention it's a manual and cumbersome process. It's not easy to put data into a spreadsheet and then manage it efficiently. And then information aside, there's evidences. For a lot of the CMMC compliance, you have to provide appropriate evidence of you meeting the requirement. Now, how are you going to upload that into a spreadsheet? You might put it up on a Google Drive or put it up on some other storage platform and then put a link into the spreadsheet to have that evidence maintained. How do you make this information after that readable to your company executives, the ones that might not be IT tech savvy or don't have time to interpret all this information? Again, this gets all confusing. And then finally, the most important aspect when it comes to achieving CMMC compliance, how do you take all that information from a spreadsheet and generate a system security plan? This all, again, starts posing a problem, especially for small and medium-sized businesses. So what if there was a low-cost solution that was for do-it-yourself? What if there were CMMC practice questions that were broken down into plain English so your IT staff or even non-IT staff could easily understand the requirements? Wouldn't it be nice to have contextual help and examples to better understand the CMMC practice requirements and get more information on what they stand for? Perhaps having sample policies and procedures to jumpstart your level 1 compliance. Able to generate an actionable gap report to prioritize and implement practices. This is just identifying gaps and seeing what you need to get done. And then finally, like I said before, implementing one of the most important things, being able to generate a system security plan for CMMC audit. I bet a lot of this sounds like a great resource for you. Well, I have the answer for you. It's securitycompliance.io, our product that we offer to all of you today to try and to continue moving forward with, because it includes all of the things I mentioned in the previous slide and more. We're just going to end with a few resources here available on the screen for you to refer to in the future. We hope you learned something from this entire presentation. If you would like to learn more, I do encourage you to go ahead and join our mailing list at www.intersec.com/contact us. And I also do invite you to try and sign up for our free CMMC Level 1 self-assessment on www.securitycompliance.io. It comes with an actionable gap report, so you should definitely check it out. And we have a couple of our socials on screen. You can email us with any questions at complianceservices@intersecinc.com, and you can keep up to date on our LinkedIn as well as this YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.